We'll do a review of Lekutei Sichos in Chelek Yutes, the fifth Sicha for the Parshas Eikev. This Sicha, the Rebbe discusses the Shemira, the protection that the mezuzah provides. The Rebbe goes into explaining the whole details that not only is a mitzvah of mezuzah that the Torah gives you these special brachas, the schar, the ma'yir b'yimechem, but actually there is actually a shemira associated, not as a schar, but from the mitzvah itself. And the Rebbe goes through the various poskim and brings down the Tur and the Bach, who clearly state that part of the mitzvah of mezuzah is the shemira. And the Rebbe deals with the Rambam, who Rambam seems to write that it is not fitting for a person to say that the mezuzah is a shmira, and the Rebbe explains the Rambam that's the Rambam means that it's not can't substitute the Torah, but together with the Torah, that the Torah mitzvah provides a shmira. That is certainly okay. The Rebbe wrote this and spoke when the Rebbe came out of the mitzvah mezuzah, and there was many people that criticized that the Rebbe was advocating this because this provides a protection. And the Rebbe concludes that this is actually that people should get involved in trying to see to it that people have mezuzahs as a protection. Let's look at the Sikha inside. Aleph. So first the Rebbe brings down that there's a schar for the mitzvah in our parsha, the Parshas Eikev. And the Rebbe says there is an additional, not like a schar, but that's part of the mitzvah. There's a benefit, and it's part of doing the mitzvah of mezuzah, which is the idea that a mezuzah provides shmira, provides protection. Aleph. Zusammen mit dem Zivu of mitzvahs mezuzah, together with the command for the mitzvah of mezuzah in Parshas Eikev. In our parsha, the pasuk says, "Uchsaptom al mezuzos beisacho v'sharecha." You shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. Zokton the Torah gleich noch dem. So the Torah immediately follows. Immediately afterward, the Torah tells us oichdem schar hamitzvah, also the reward for the mitzvah of mezuzah. The Torah says, "L'man yirbu yimechem mevenechem goyim," so that your days and the days of your son will increase. So that's the schar mitzvah. This is also brought down as a ruling of halacha in Shulchan Aruch. Kol hazoyir bo, anybody who is careful with the mezuzah, yarichu yomov yimei v'chulu, his days will be prolonged and the days of his sons, etc. So this part, Rebbe says, getting a reward for the mitzvah, we have other mitzvahs that the Torah says, do the mitzvahs so that you will be rewarded. That's not unique to the mitzvah mezuzah. What is unique to the mitzvah mezuzah is the shmira part, which is in addition to the schar. In them inyan hodos haschar, this idea of letting one know the reward, gleicht sich ois mitzvahs mezuzah mit noch gewisse mitzvah. So this is the same. It straightens out. It equals with other mitzvahs. Was the Torah gitzuvis befedish, in which the Torah lets you very specifically know their schar, the reward, such as the kibud avaim or kiyotzebay, honoring father and mother, is similar. Megefint aber in mitzvahs mezuzah. However, the Rebbe wants to say in the mitzvah mezuzah we find something in addition. Was megefit by other mitzvahs which we don't find by other mitzvahs. Chazal zogen, our sages of blessed memory tell us, und der Tur bringt es up, and the Tur brings us down. As durch dem was miskaveya mezuzah in Pesach habayis, through this that a person places a mezuzah on the entrance to the house, he that oberster dem bayis, Hashem guards that home. Putting a mezuzah is basically putting up Hashem as a guard to your home. As it says, they're quoting from the Rebbe brings down. Melech basar vadom mibifnim, v'avodov shemrim oisem bachutz. The way it works by a king of flesh and blood he is on the outside, the king, and he needs protection provided by the avodah of his servants. They guard him from the outside. But the Yidden works the other way around. Yishenim, you sleep on you're on the inside, you're sleeping on the beds. And God, Hashem, HaKadosh Baruch Hu guards you from the outside. So that part of the mezuzah, that there is a shmira, this is in addition to the Laman Yarich Yomecha, which is a schar, which we find by other mitzvahs. Was on die shmira, was wird aufgetan durch mitzvahs mezuzah, this protection, this guarding that is accomplished through the mitzvah mezuzah, is not an inyan for schar mitzvah. That's not a reward for the mitzvah, a payment for the mitzvah. Nor dos is with the Bach is masbir. This is, as explained by the Bach, this is a benefit and a profit from the mitzvah itself. Not the reward that comes. That's the mitzvah itself provides that benefit and that profit. This is in addition to the schar of his children, long life and children, as the pasuk says. He has another benefit that this actually protects him. When the mit is the Bach masbir. And that's with the fact the Bach explains, those was the Tur schreibt as the Shmira durch the Mezuzah is Gedolim Mizah. Why the Tur writes over there that the protection of the Mezuzah is even greater than this. This is greater than the reward that the Torah says. Gresser von dem Schar leman yirbu v'goyim. This is greater than the reward of leman yirbu that the pasuk says. Because this is a benefit from the mitzvah itself, so it's greater. It's not as a reward, but this is the benefit the mitzvah itself rewards you with that. Noch furthermore, so it's not like the mezuzah has a benefit, but it's not connected. But this is actually the main purpose of the mezuzah. It's made for protection. Nochmer, that inyan hashmira is nit kezaytik. This idea of guarding is not a side benefit and a profit from mitzvahs mezuzah that you have. No, those is an iker mitzvahs mezuzah. That's a main part of the mitzvah mezuzah. In Taishus languages, the shimur of it. It's meant for protection. Okay. So here we see clearly from the Tur and the Bach, there's the idea of the mezuzah that it provides protection. So the Rebbe wants to explain now that normally one should do mitzvahs not for any ulterior motives. But of course, we know the Rambam and the Gemara says that we have to start. If a person is not at the level to do a mitzvah, he's allowed to, not only allowed to, but the order, the way we always begin, we do things for ulterior motives. But yet, that's not the ultimate goal. If a person gives tzedakah, even so that his son will live, and things like that, it's not the ultimate way to do the mitzvah. But the Rebbe argues that when it comes to mitzvah mezuzah, since that's the main part of the mezuzah l'shimur of it, it would be okay. That is actually part of the mitzvah to do it for protection, and therefore it's not considered like you're not doing it, that you're doing it not for the right purpose, and it's just a beginning. It's look inside base. It's Adam Yisrael in mitzvah mezuzah, because of this advantage. In the mitzvah mezuzah, as the guf mitzvah is ashmira, that the mitzvah itself is a protection. Is no achilik between the moifan hakiyum. For mitzvahs mezuzah, there is a difference between the way we fulfill the mitzvah mezuzah and the moifan hakiyum from other mitzvahs, and the way we fulfill other mitzvahs. Again, that other mitzvahs you have to l'chatchila. The best is to perform it not for any ulterior motive, but the mitzvah mezuzah you can perform it for the benefit of shmira. That's part of the mitzvah. B'chlal, generally, why does the Torah bring the reward? The Torah wants to encourage the person to do. With bringing befeirish them schar mitzvahs. Why does the Torah? What does the Torah intend by bringing specifically the reward of the mitzvah? Is the Torah oisen? The Torah means with this. The Torah is out to tell you nit stam to the tzel megidam. It doesn't just want to tell you that there is a schar. This is the schar for the mitzvah. Nor kipshuta shel mikra, as the simple meaning of the verse. What is it telling you? To mechazik zayin durch them. That is to strengthen through this. The Torah is telling you the reward. Umizar zayin kima mitzvahs, and to hasten and to encouragement the observance of the mitzvahs, to tell you that there is reward for it. Why would we want you to do a mitzvah for reward? So we know that that's the way to start. That's the important thing, to know that there is reward. Chazal sagen noch, our sages of blessed memory say, a person should always occupy himself in Torah mitzvahs, even if it's not for the sake of the mitzvah. And the Rambam brings this up, the Rambam brings this down as a law. So this is not only in the Gemara with Chazal, but it's actually halacha. Unis masbir, and he explains, Azazoy muzayin der seder alim. This is actually has to be the way to learn. You can't start hakatanim v'chulu. You cannot teach them, but the only way to do it is that they do it. You give them treats and you entice them, and you promise them things, and that is all in order to receive the schar. Until their mind increases and they get smarter. So so then you tell them the secret that the ultimate is not for doing for the other, it's just lishma. And then you train them a little bit this idea that we shouldn't be doing it for the ulterior, for other things, for the schar. Gently, you tell the menachas to do it for lishma. So that means that's the way it has to be. That's why the Torah tells us these promises to encourage us. The Rambam also goes into great length in his commentary on the Mishnah, which he says, as these was einen noch nit, those who are not yet at the level, was masigin ha'emes, they grasp the truth, so that they are like Avraham Avinu, peace unto him. So then we encourage them on this, and we strengthen their intent that they should do it for the ulterior motive, to do the mitzvah for the reward, until they'll get to the truth. But those who are not yet grasping the truth, they're not like Avraham Avinu. So then we actually encourage them and we strengthen them through Shalai Lishma. So while this is true, but by other mitzvahs, that's not the ultimate way to do the mitzvah. That's the way that you have to do it. That's what the Torah encourages it. On the other hand, this movement is understood as when these mekayim a mitzvah, when you do a mitzvah just for the reward, felt done in shleimus hakim from the mitzvah. So then you're missing out in the wholesomeness of fulfillment of the mitzvah. Because it's not for the sake of Hashem, not the sake of the mitzvah, the some ulterior mitzvahs. Nochbar, this would be true even if you have a combined, you want to do a mitzvah, but you also want some benefit. It's also not the ultimate by other mitzvahs. Nochbar. Even if he should do a mitzvah in order to fulfill the mitzvah of the creator of Hashem. But he also has in mind to benefit by himself also. For example, he wants his son to live, wants it to be healed. I should be getting Olam Haba. So as ulterior motive, this is for the mitzvah, but also something ulterior for himself. Even though in this item, what he's doing is a tzaddik gomer, and therefore he's a noch nit, and yet Is it noch nicht Rashi's language of the Rebbe quotes here? He says noch nicht der Schleimer dike Reifel Kiyom mitzvah, but that's not the wholesome way of fulfilling the mitzvahs. A mitzvah should technically be done only l'shem shamayim, in the wholesome and the greatest way. But by mezuzah, it's different. But when we talk about here in this idea of the mezuzah, not the reward, but the guarding, that the mezuzah is a guard of the mezuzah, Yeshlema, we can say, as we bald, dos is need beter schar for the mitzvah. Since this is not a reward for the mitzvah, you say don't do the mitzvah for the reward. But this is not a reward. But this is a result. And there's a part of the mitzvah itself. Part of the mitzvah is to place a guard on your door. Make Hashem a mezuzah. Make Hashem the guard over the house. That's not anything lacking in the wholesomeness of fulfillment. When it's done because of her protection. This is part of the idea of the mitzvah. And more, it's not only it's part of the mitzvah ideas, from Tosis, as mentioned earlier in Tosis is Matoras mitzvah, the shimur of it. This is the purpose, the goal of the mitzvah, meant for protection. So to put up a mezuzah for protection is something which is okay, it's in the fall, on the greatest level. Not only is it made for protection, but even the way we place the mezuzah, we see that we place it on the outside to protect you from the Rishus HaRabim. So you see in the action, the way you put the mezuzah, not only in your thought, what you're thinking, you're doing a maisa and you're placing it in a way that it provides protection. From the timing. One of the reasons was why we have to set the mezuzah in the tefach, which is close to the public domain, is so that the mezuzah should protect them. Protect them from the Rishus HaRabim. Those haste, which means those was the mezuzah is a shmira. The fact that the mezuzah is a protection is not nervous mekenas hoben in machshava basically some mezuzah. It's not only that you're allowed to, you can have that in your mind when you're setting the mezuzah. So it's a thought. I'm doing it for a shmira. Nor does bashteit that oifen kima mitzvah. Nor does bashtim them oifen kima mitzvah. But that actually decides how we should do the mitzvah. This idea of shmira. And this is something which is in action. It determines where we should put the mezuzah. With the Tur bringt us as he brings this down in continuation of the words that you put it there for the protection. So you see that you're doing it, you're placing it in the location wise as a protection. So the Rebbe is going to explain now. The Tur himself makes a little bit, qualifies this statement, which seems to say that we should not do it for Shmirah. He seems to say do it to fulfill the mitzvah. The Rebbe is going to explain that what he means to say that it shouldn't be done just for a Shmirah as something outside. It should be done as a mitzvah shmira. Let's look inside. You can ask, the Tur Lane is not Messiah. The Tur concludes over there. Noch bringing them the mountain din after he brings down the din mentioned before that it is for made that that's for protection, that he's allowed to do this for protection, as quoted over here. So why does the Rambam, but what does the Rambam himself said? The Rebbe wrote it down right at the beginning. So that the Eibishter watches the Malchut Afrimba, but the Mechutz. So after bringing down and telling that this is the great Shmirah that takes place for the Mezuzah, so he brings down. He said, "Messiah, the Chorving the Magdalene, umekomokoim lo yehei kavonas amekayim el lekayim mitzvahs haberis baruch shetzivon Allah." Still, the intent of the one who fulfills the mitzvah mezuzah should only be to fulfill the mitzvah of the blessed Creator, who has commanded us on the mitzvah mezuzah. Amizol nit mekabe sein as the mezuzah l'shem shmira. That the mezuzah, we should not have in mind that the mezuzah is for protection. We should do it because Hashem's mitzvah. So the Rebbe says like this. First of all, the Rambam, the Tur does not say it's a prohibition. He's over the Tur zoktos nit b'leshon shel isur. So it doesn't say it's an isur. It says lo yehei kavonas emakayim. So whoever wants to first, if you want to argue that the Tur says it's not an isur. Further, the Rebbe says Eikev nit mistaber. Also, it's not logical to say as the Tur kum do zogon that the Tur is coming to us that the person should not think at all when you're doing the mitzvah mezuzah to think he's trying to tell you the Tur, don't think it's a protection. But as I said before, because it's a foretory. You see, how do you fulfill the mitzvah is doing an action, a pula. Why are you putting it in Tefach Samach L'Shus Rabim to show that this is a protection? So it's for sure that one can think a thought that it is for protection when he's placing it as a protection. So what's the problem with thinking protection? So that's not what the Rambam, that's not what the Tur means. Nor the meat is a nor shelil. What he's rejecting, what he doesn't want you to do, the Tur is as beim ki mitzvahs mezuzah darf nit sein die kavone, that when you're fulfilling the mitzvah mezuzah, you shouldn't have the intention as metutas to leave der te'elas hashmira. The reason that you're doing it is because there's the benefit of protection. Was mahat von der mitzvah that you have in the mitzvah to say, if there wasn't the benefit, if it wasn't the protection, then maybe I wouldn't do it. I'm doing it for the protection. So that he's saying to you, he's trying to tell you, no. The person would have fulfilled it with the same desire and the same perfection. Even if it didn't have anything to do with any protection. Nor as because it needs to be to fulfill Hashem's blessed, the Creator's mitzvah. So that's what we're doing it. So that's but on the other hand, you are permitted at that same time to have in mind as the mitzvah bashtating them, that this is what the mitzvah consists of. Was the Eibishter had geheißen Aiden machen Hashmira of Zabais, that Hashem commanded a yid to make a protection for his house, which is the mezuzah. So you're doing it not because of the protection, because Hashem told you to make a protection. But it's still the protection that Hashem told you to make it over there. So we're doing it because Hashem said it. But Hashem said to have protection. That's what Hashem told you to put up a mezuzah for protection. But let me argue even further. Let's say a person would only do the mitzvah because putting on a mezuzah because he wants it to protect him, not to fulfill the mitzvah of Hashem. He says, "Kiyama mitzvahs." It still fulfilled the mitzvah. Nor was then shlei l'shma. You're fulfilling the mitzvah, but it's not doing it for the Shem Hashem. As the Torah says, don't do it for that. But also then, at their standing, we're there up to in their das v'chochma, as quoted before from the Rambam. So we will encourage them, and we will strengthen their kavanah. Let them think shalom l'shma. So if a person, let's say, wants to put up a mezuzah, should we encourage him if he's only putting it on because he wants protection for himself and for his family through putting on the mezuzah? Go ahead and encourage him. Why? Because as the Rambam says, so it's shalom l'shma, but he's still doing the mitzvah. But what the Tur was saying over here, as the Rebbe explained, is don't do it only for protection, and that's not the right thing. And if it wasn't protection, you wouldn't do it. The right way to do this, do it because the mitzvah is Hashem. But the mitzvah Hashem is to place up a protection on your door. But we have a little bit of a bigger problem with the language in the Rambam, with what the Rambam writes. The Rebbe is going to address now in his Dalit. Over there, L'chayre can, when you them fragen, L'chayre can ask on this above, the Rambam Pascal in the Tur bringt this around. The Rambam rules, and it's also brought down in the Tur. Eilu shekoisim bifnim shmeisam alachim. The Rambam writes, you write the word Shaddai, Shin Dalad Yud Shakai in the back of the mezuzah between. But he says there's other people that write inside of the mezuzah. They write shmeisam alachim, names of the angels, or other things they do. So the Rambam says, so those people don't have a portion in the world to come for writing those kamiyas for those things, and explains why. These fools, not sufficient that they have negated the mitzvah. They made the mezuzah is possible. The Rebbe will say in a minute. But not only that, but rather they made out of a great mitzvah mezuzah, as if it would be some sort of a parchment, some sort of an omen of their own benefit. What is the Rambam? What does it mean? This haste. As those was the mezuzah werd betracht. The fact that one considers this mezuzah is the akameya shel anois atzmam. It's just like a akameya, writing a omen, a token that a person uses for his own benefit, as a protection. So the Rambam says, "Is as nit?" It would seem is as nit loizani for shalei lishmo. It's not only that he's not doing it for the sake of the mitzvah. The Rambam says it's something which is very foolish. The Rambam even says, he's part of those who don't have a portion in the world to come. So the Rebbe cautions now that we're not, in our discussion, we're discussing to put up the mezuzah for a benefit, for a kamiyah. And the Rambam seems to say that doing it as a tipshus is but the Rebbe says, the Rambam also uses the words that you mevatel the mitzvah. So the Rebbe says the bittul mitzvah is not apply over here when we're putting it up for a kameh or not in our discussion. That's talking about somebody who actually put in words into the mezuzah. If you put in words into the mezuzah, then you're actually mevatel the mitzvah. Here we're talking about for you because any word, extra words in the mezuzah makes the mezuzah puzzle. So that's the bittul mitzvah. So in our case, for sure, we're not talking about the bittul mitzvah. We're talking about the seriousness of taking the mezuzah and making it in the kameya. So the Rambam, those was the Rambam zogt as botla ha-mitzvah, that the mitzvah was bottle mizmevatel the mitzvah, bitlo ha-mitzvah, mizmevatel the mitzvah's mezuzah, which that you take with disease possible. Is nicht shaykh when it done. That's not apply in our case. But the psul is need to leave. Then was also mitzvah gedol chulu kilo kamechul. The reason why the mitzvah is bottled, the bitl mitzvah, is not because they made it in the kameya. Making it the kameya or making it fanoa satzmam, that wouldn't render it possible. The reason why it's possible not to leave them was with that because they've added names of the malachim in Pnima Mezuzah in the inside of the Mezuzah. On the Rambam passed in the Friedrich halacha, the Rambam ruled in the previous halacha, if you add even one letter in the inside, it's possible. And what we're saying by us, we're not talking about those what the Rambam is mamshich, also mitzvah gedolah v'chulu, that they made the mitzvah. That's not telling you what the mitzvah, that's why it's bottled. Is it kitam? Not saying the reason why bitla mitzvah because they wrote in the mezuzah. That's what bitla mitzvah. When the Rambam says that they made a mitzvah gedayla, is not a reason why the mitzvah is bottled because they're in there. Is nitkin tam. That's not a reason. Also mitzvah gedayla, and that's why the mitzvah is possible. Not a hisofa bitla mitzvah. Not only were they mevatel the mitzvah, but in addition to being mevatel the mitzvah, they turned it into, and this into something which is a kameya. This is explanation why he said why they make it into kameya, why they don't have a chelek. So, but basically, what do we say from this Rambam? It seems like for a person to say that this is a kameya, or this is something like a benefit, for that is something so terrible that you don't have Elam Haba and you don't have Tipshim or something. Why? So how do we say here that you can use the mezuzah as a protection? Hey, the Rebbe says you can't say this. It's not possible to say that this is what the Rambam meant. That you can't think that it's a mitzvah. But in Emerson, Kemenit learning in their halacha from Rambam, we cannot learn in this halacha of Rambam. Does the Isur Bashtet not in them was not a kavanah shel lishma? What is the prohibition over here? Because he has a kavanah shel lishma, and he has the tunutz in the mezuzah sashvil nois atzmo, so he's doing it not for the right purposes. He's not doing for Hashem. He wants to protection, and that because he does something so terrible, and that's why he's in the chelek mabo, and that's the prohibition. Unless with them, it's difficult to say. As to leave them so they're tippers, that that's why we should call him a fool. We say the Toshis brought down that it's made for protection. So if he does it for protection, is a tippish canal. Ubefrat biz azarehu bichlal mishein lam chelik v'habo. The Rambam should say he should be to the extent that he doesn't have because he's doing it shlo l'shmo. He's doing it for a protection. So that's why he doesn't have a part in the world to come. Pshas Psak Din Mefurish in the Rambam writes very clearly that even Habori Shekora Psukim Chulu, Kadesh Togim, a person who is healthy, who's reading verses, in order to protect him, how does it mutter? It's permissible. In other words, you're allowed to use words of Torah to provide protection. It says, that you can use Torah as protection. We don't say, oh, so you're using the words of Torah, you made it into a kameya of your own benefit. We don't say that. It's okay. So what does the Rambam mean? The Rambam Alain is a smasbi their meat. The Rambam himself explains it. Was that is moisif. The Rambam adds, noch the verter kilu kamesh anois atzmon. After he says this, he makes it into a kameya of self-protection. As it entered their foolish heart, as if this is something that benefits you in the vanities of the world. Which means like this. Those was they schreiben rein in der mezuzah. This that they inscribe in the mezuzah. Shemus hamalachim v'chulu, names of the angels, etc. Hagam the mezuzah lein is ashmida. Even though the mezuzah on its own is already a protection, why are they writing other things in there? Don't forget, the mezuzah lein is a protection. On its own, it's a protection. Why do they write? Is a bavais as bazeis the mezuzah in ganzen nit kenein shel mitzvah. That means that they don't believe that the mezuzah is a mitzvah at all. Because if they believe it's a mitzvah, vavos faran ort hotas to meisiv zayin in their mitzvah shmirish l'kodesh baruch hu. Because what space is there? How could you add in the mitzvah and the protection of Hashem by putting in your own thing? So it means that you believe that this is not the mezuzah, nor akamiyah shalanos atzmon. This is something of their own, something that they did by themselves. Adosis to live zayin hanos v'zayin havle ho'elam. that is for his benefits, which are the vanities of the world. And that's why he's doing it. Not because the Eibishter provides them protection. It's their own protection of Havle and the river is a tipshus. And that's why it's a foolishness. For a mezuzah is a shmira norder far. Why does a mezuzah protect? Why is a mezuzah protection? The only reason was for a mezuzah shmira norder far because it's a mitzvah. Because it's a mitzvah. Und sie tut the shmira, and that accomplishes the guarding. In their side, but at that same time, what do? Because they're adding to the mezuzah, not a zichel, meaning they are fooling themselves, and they mean the tipshim. As the shmira is not for their mitzvah, the shmira is not of the mitzvah. But for nakamiyah shall know satzman, the shmira comes from something of their own protection. Because my time is bazei recht as is a dover amhane b'havlo, and that's why they think that this is something that benefits in the vanities of the world. And that's where they have a part of the world to come, because they are denouncing the mitzvah, the shmir of the mitzvah, and they just make it like into something else. So why don't they have chelek mabo? Similar to you find the halacha, as these was oisim divrei Torah refu's guf, those who make the words of Torah as a medicine for the body, they are the ones that are denying the Torah. But Torah is no refuas nefashos. Torah is only a healing for the soul, and by making it into a physical, taking away the mitzvah out of it and making it into a physical, making the Torah into a physical thing for the Hanos Atzvam, that is in Chelek. But if a person sets a kosher mezuzah, and is garnic meisiv in their mezuzah and doesn't add anything to the mezuzah, it doesn't change anything. Nor ban kima mitzvah the machshava, but rather when he does the mitzvah he has in mind, as a tutas vale vil the shmir of the mitzvah because he wants the guarding of the mitzvah. He says l'chol yesef to the most, at the most, what this can be, gather from kibbutz shlo l'shmo, could be fulfilling a mitzvah, not the shmo. We're not going to say that this is going to be a tepesh enum chelek mabo, ubefrat, but especially whenever it deals with language, the kesemish the others, ubefrat when tut es nit belois al shmira, especially when the person doesn't just do it for shmira, but as mekayim zayim mekayim in the midst of the Eibishter, he wants to fulfill the mitzvah of Eibishter. Was rot geheisen arifling a shmira from Pesach HaBayis. Eibishter told us to put a guard on the Pesach HaBayis. So he's doing it because the Torah said to bring the Pesach HaBayis. So even if you just do it for a mitzvah, it's shlo l'shma. You just do it for protection, shlo l'shma. But if you do it because the Eibishter told you to put up a protection in a house, so that's kind of the mitzvah. He's a dumb kind of the mitzvah, b'shlem musa. Then he fulfills the mitzvah in its complete way. So now that we're saying that the mitzvah of mezuzah has a inherent idea of protection, this will explain another Mishnah in Maseches Eikev. So apil ha'amur li'il. So based on what we said before, as the shmira was oivgiton durch mezuzah, that this protection that is accomplished through mezuzah is not a schar or the skula nisefes, not a reward. It's not a special omen addition of the mitzvah. But this is meinyan a mitzvah gufa. That's part of the mitzvah. Shmira is the content, is the idea of the mitzvah itself. But verstandig advar pelle, that would explain something surprising. Was begefint bekesher to mitzvah mezuzah that we find with regards to the mitzvah mezuzah. The Mishnah Maseches Kelim, the Rechem Tois Kama Kelim, over there the Maseches Kelim Mishnah enumerates several different kinds of vessels But some are base kibble that have a receptacle. On the river Halelut Maim, that's what they be Tomei because they have a keli. A keli that has a base kibble is betah. When Einer Fuzeh is one of the kelim in the concept is machkal sheyesh boy base kibble mezuzah, a stick that has a receptacle so you can put a mezuzah in that stick. Zog the Tesis Yontev says there, the Efsher Shehoyu Anoshim Bizman HaMishnah, perhaps that the people during the time of the Mishnah, Noisim Mezuzah Imam, they would carry a mezuzah with them. And they considered it to be a mitzvah and a protection for them. That's why there was this makkah. Was from them was we bring darum the mitzvahs from makkah sheyesh bechulu. The fact that the Gemara, the Mishnah brings this down on such a case, shulib shmira, is this not battle? We don't say, well, no, that's not something that you should do. Mishnah brings it down as one of the kelim. Is mashmaz odian hogot. So it appears that that is something which does make sense. The emes is mashma nochbar mucha from Yerushalmi. And the truth, the Rebbe says it seems and it's actually evident in Yerushalmi as the mezuzah gufa, even not the mitzvah, just the mezuzah itself, what is the zgulas hashmira has in itself that special quality of shmira, the mezuzah itself. Afilu is the body talk in Yekima mitzvah, even when there is no fulfillment of the mitzvah. As when they say in Yerushalmi, it's related in Yerushalmi as Rabbeinu HaKodesh Geshikta mezuzah, that Rabbeinu HaKodesh, Rabbi Nossi, had sent a mezuzah to Artabon Anochi. He was a goy. They exchanged gifts. Artabon said that Rabbeinu HaKodesh, he sent him a very expensive piece of that has the ends of a lot of value. He asked the Rebbe to send him back something of great value that cannot be measured. So he sent him back a mezuzah. So he says, this is very limited value. So he sent him like this. So he gesagt. So Rebbe answered him as a shiktim. He says, you sent me something that I have to have guards to watch the expensive items, but I sent you Mila, a matter that the mochloch. You could be sleeping. The himintalach is going to watch you. So not that you have to watch it, but it watches you. Now, he was a goy, Artaban. He sends him a mezuzah, tells that it's going to watch him. Das heißt, Hagam as a nochri is not together for ki mitzvahs mezuzah. Nochri is not in the definition. He can't fulfill mezuzah. Von deswegen is euch in dem Fall scheint der Inyan. So also in that case, we can apply for mintalach. It's going to guard you. Was you doing mezuzah? That isn't a mezuzah. So, the following and the concluding of that story was when gebracht in Shiltis, as brought down in Shiltis, through this that he took the mezuzah, this actually accomplished the protection. So that shaded that demon ran away. So we see that it helped. This is something very surprising matter. Since the custom was to put in the stick not another piece of portion of the Torah, Shema Yisrael. You put actually the portion of mezuzah in there. The Shema from the mezuzah. Is this noch ha'yichochaz mados genumen? So that proves that they took it not al stam a parsha from Torah. They didn't take just a portion of Torah. Noch is bechlal megid. Torah generally protects it. Take any parsha. Why did they put mezuzah? They're not al shmira for a mezuzah. They took it because it guarded a mezuzah. Be the shaykh the gather for shmira for a mezuzah. How could you have the a mezuzah? A stick is not. It's possible. You can't put a mezuzah on a stick. The din is as told of a makam psul. If you hang the mezuzah on a stick, it's possible. Only the Gemara is noch because the Gemara emphasizes sakona ve'imba mitzvah. It's dangerous. There's no mitzvah. It's dangerous because there's no protection there. Rashi explains Pirish Rashi sakona. And I was thinking you're endangering yourself because you're living without a mezuzah. She'ena ba'is mishtavav. Achi kve'eno b'tzuras ha'pesach kilchasa until you set it up in the doorpost as the halach is. Up to that point, this is not of no value. So you see, a stick is not a protection as a mezuzah, not a mitzvah mezuzah. So the Rebbe is going to explain, but the inherent quality of mezuzah is inherently associated with protection. So even when there is no mitzvah of mezuzah, there's still protection there. But first, the Rebbe says, yeah, sometimes people put up a mezuzah even not for the purpose of the mezuzah, but it doesn't have the protection. Choch, the Gemara that Tzelda. The Gemara relates over there as Shabbeis Munbas Hamelach Hayoisim. We put the same cane. They used to put mezuzahs in the stick in their where they lived over there as a zeicher mezuzah, as a remembrance of mezuzah. We become a mitzvahs like we find by several mitzvahs as we macht a zeicher to a mitzvah. Then we can not mekayim sein that when you can't fulfill the mitzvah for whatever reason, so then you make a memory, make a zeicher to the mitzvah. As if it is roya was menem the way of Pesach. So you take the zroya on the night of Pesach, a zeicher to korban Pesach. We don't have a korban Pesach, we bring a zeicher. So sometimes we bring a mezuzah and a stick as a zeicher to the mezuzah that we can't put up. If it not as durch a zeicher, but we don't find that, okay, a zeicher is a zeicher, but it doesn't get you the reward, it doesn't get you the power of the mitzvah. So you should get the reward of the mitzvah. It's understand the reasoning, you're not going to get it. Even though you're putting it up as somewhat, or it's a remembrance, apitated to the mitzvah, according to them to the mitzvah, is over the mitzvah. The reward you get when you do the mitzvah. When you don't do the mitzvah, like Mumbas did, they put it up as zeicher. So even though people put in a stick or something, how did they get the protection? How did this Artaban get the protection? And how come they had these sticks with the mezuzahs there? What did they do for them? But Apia now, based on the above, is muva. We do understand. The Baal the Shmira Shal Yidei HaMezuzah is Farbund mit Guf HaMezuzah. Since the protection that you get through the mezuzah is tied with the actual mezuzah itself, the Mele is Shayach, therefore it applies as Me'en for the Minyan HaShmira, that somewhat of this idea of protection is from the mezuzah lane. The mezuzah by itself has somewhat, because that's part of what the mezuzah is. Afila Eder means der mit Mekayim mitzvah mezuzah. Even prior, before you fulfill the mitzvah mezuzah, it does have some protection. Gebald, sie ist geschrieben geworden durch mezuzah b'chulu. It was written for mezuzah. Oder Afila be'artaban. Even be'artaban was not a Jew, and yet the mezuzah had some protection. And now the Rebbe explains another a story about the Frierdiker Rebbe. When they arrested him and they asked him, do you know where you are? He said, well, I'm in a place you don't have to need a mezuzah. Why did he say it in such a way, in a place that you don't need a mezuzah, instead of saying, oh, there's a place where Hashem is that you do need, in every place you need a mezuzah. Let's see inside. This can also explain a surprising story. Was quite Kedushas Merichama Admur, my father-in-law, the Rebbe, related, he related. Be'ez that it's you put in a Meiser when he was in incarceration, hat man beim ersten Verhören gefragt, so during the first investigation, so the interrogation, they asked him, do you know where you are? The Rebbe answered, so he answered, Avada, basic, for sure I know. I find myself in such a space, such a place, was is potter from a mezuzah, that is exempt from mezuzah. As is do erter v'chazayin potter from a mezuzah. There are places that are exempt from a mezuzah. The base dirshel susim, that is, you have the stables, the house where the stables of horses, ubeis hakisei, and a bathroom, a toilet, that don't need a mezuzah. In a move on is not understood. Why did my father-in-law, the Rebbe, why did he choose something negative? Was his potter for mezuzah? but this is a place which is exempt from mezuzah. The chayre given masim, it would be more fitting to answer something positive. As gefindt sich in an Ort, that he finds himself in a place. Was euch dort is Pratis. Here too, there is divine providence. Not saying there is divine providence. Say something positive. Befrat, as is das Madgish, the previous Rebbe himself emphasizes that Tzelem the Prote HaMaisa, pardon for her and them, as when he related the details of the incarceration before the interrogation and afterwards, as his molekularis kvedu kadema, that the world is filled with Hashem's glory and similar. So the Rebbe emphasized all this, so why didn't he answer that? Especially my father-in-law, the Rebbe, he wanted to show them as he related many times, as a that he is going with full force, he doesn't consider them at all. He does what he needs to do without taking anything into consideration. As he used the language to the extent as if they don't exist, they're like nothing, like zero, totally, mamish, nothing. Well, the past song would be fitting. We should have said, should have told them this. Now, the in that. So, what is the idea? We can say. He wanted also in this incarceration, he wanted to have the protection of the mezuzah. Since you cannot literally fulfill the mitzvah, but the Riber getan, Wasser hat gekent, so therefore he did what he can possibly do to make it a remembrance. So minyan mezuzah, to the idea of mezuzah. Well, noch better. Then in Torah's mezuzah, he wanted to discuss the laws, the teaching, the halachas of mezuzah, the Torah mezuzah. That brings down something of the protection of mezuzah. The Farater gesagt, that's what he said, and they verified the halacha. As their ord gefunden is potter mezuzah. He says this place is exempt from mezuzah. Because the mit that created the connection with mezuzah in a double way. Aleph, number one, durch ein limud von hilchos mezuzah, by studying the laws of mezuzah, is do psagdin chazal. We have the ruling of our sages of blessed memory. If you learn to study the laws of the Oila, it's as if you go to an Oila. Starting about mitzvah mezuzah, verifying that you don't need a mezuzah here, that's learning the halacha, so therefore you fulfill the mitzvah mezuzah. Base. When, number two, through verifying the halacha, as their bais, that this house, Eris Vigeder Uchsaptom al Mezuzah Beisecha. So while it is Beisecha, you have to write Nahon, is Potter Mezuzah, but in our case, this is a bais. While it is a house, and the Torah says Beisecha, you need it, but in this case, it's Potter Mezuzah. But the Poyel given a Shayches, so then he created impact connection, nicht nur mit Torah's Mezuzah, not only with the laws, mitzvahs mezuzah. He also had with the actual mitzvah mezuzah. Ashayches shlilis. There is a connection, rejected connection, not thereby is his potter mezuzah. This house is exempt from mezuzah. Say it a little bit differently. The shayches from a bayis of mezuzah can sein of tzreifan. The connection between a house and a mezuzah can be in two ways. Aleph, number one. Abayis was is mechuyev mezuzah. That's a house which is obligated mezuzah. So then is the shaykhis in ayvun chiyuvi. Then the connection is in a positive way. Durch kavez and the mezuzah pesach abayis by setting up a mezuzah on the door. Then you have Bayes, number 2, a Bayes versus Potter mezuzah, a house which is exempt mezuzah. He's the shaykhis and neifn shligus. So that's connection is through not folgt ois tziva haTorah, by listening to the command of the Torah is nit kaveh dort mezuzah, and not setting up a mezuzah there. That's the mezuzah. That's the mitzvah's mezuzah by not putting it up there. We can say this was the reason of my father the Rebbe. He chose to say as finds himself in a home which is exempt from mezuzah. But this brought down an inyan shel shmira from mezuzah. This brought down the protection of the mezuzah through the saying that this is not a mezuzah house, but that's the law. The mitzvahs of mezuzah is fulfilled in that way. Ches. But them alm is verstanding from the old the above. It's understood. Them goydel haschus, the great merit was is doing the rishtadlus that there is in the effort in mifzah mezuzah, in the mifzah of mezuzah campaign of the Fradi Yimenu Elo, especially nowadays. Eden zijn doch gekifse achas ben ein zegen. The Jewish people are like one sheep among 70 wolves. Vazeir hilf, who is their help? Is the Royesh Matzilu V'Shem Ruchulu, is the shepherd that protects them and guards them. Hashem. Noch the letzte Murois, especially when we talk about these latest happenings in Welchem, mit Gezen the Muchash, you saw vividly, as es had gefelt in the bottom of the Gelitana, that those who suffered, it was lacking in their homes in the key mitzvahs mezuzah, in the fulfilled mitzvahs mezuzah. Was their shame that the name of us Amenzol Zen is an Eifel, name of Hashem, Shin Daled Yud, is geschrieben an Eifel Amenzol Zen, when the mezuzah shein zusammengewinkelt, that it's written when the mezuzah is already rolled up, is Shaddai Shin Daled Yud. So that's what we write. That's a name to be visible when you roll it up. Is Shin Daled Rosh Tevis Shomer Dalsis Yisrael, the one that protects the houses of Israel. Is their shame with Shmirosu Nid Given Bazeh. So they were lacking. They were lacking that in those happenings. They didn't have the Shin Daled Yud, the Shomer Dalsis Yisrael. So therefore, we have to make the greatest effort. As jeder Yidischer Haus, that every Jewish home will have a mezuzah of alle Tim. Should have a mezuzah in all doors. Am chiyov mezuzah, those who are obligated to mezuzah. Und sie soll sein angeklappt Hilchosa, and it should be banged up according to the halacha. Und die Stadlus, this effort of sein, side by anoshim, so whether both for men or side by anoshim, also for women. They're obligated to mezuzah just like men. The Gemara explains this. Only men need to live. And Torah says the man in the pasuk in the quoted in the beginning. So, but women have to need chaya too. But furthermore, being the mainstay of the house, it lies upon the woman a special obligation to protect all matters of the house, and therefore also the guarding of the house, going through the mezuzahs on your home. This brings about a protection for the home. And everything else that finds himself in the house. And even more, as the Zohar states, the Shmir is an oifen, that the protection is away, Hashem Yishmor, Seischa, even when you leave, when you go out, even when you leave the house. Since all Yidden are responsible for all of one another. We all are like one story, all together is verstandig. It's understood that durch der Esof von Kiyum Mitzvahs Mezuzah von jedem einzigen Cheder am Mezuzah, by the addition of the fulfillment of the Mitzvah Mezuzah of every single room that is obligated mezuzah, that the Tosef Eichen der Shmira from the ganze Kaimer, that adds to the protection of the whole story from Kol Yisrael, Odin, from Yederit, from every Jew, and Noshim Mitab, the men, women, and children, Chol Mokum Shu, wherever they are. Ubeshein HaKosuv, using the language of the Pasuk, Hashem Yishmer Tzeischo Ve'echa Ve'ata Ve'adela. This is Mesichas Chag HaShavuos, V'Shabbos Parshas B'Haloischo, Tovshin Chovov, and Yud Beis Tammuz, Tovshin Lamed Aleph.